Out of all the engine teardown videos I've done, this one is far and away the most requested. The infamous V10 turbo out of the first gen Touareg. This engine came out of an 06 Touareg with over 200,000 miles on it, and allegedly it has a bad camshaft. As you can see, this engine is enormous. It fills up the entire engine bay. Compare that to that V6 we tore down a while back. It's pretty cramped. Also, you'll notice here on the front, there's no serpentine belt. That means alternator, power steering pump, AC compressor, all are driven off the back side of the engine. It looks like a clock back there. We got a whole bunch to get to before I can show you that though. So I'm gonna start up on top, get rid of some of this so we can figure out which camshaft is bad, and hopefully it is a bad camshaft and not just those exhausts that I found that were broken. I didn't diagnose it, just to be clear. Our first order of business is to get some of these wires out of the way. This is what 20 years of, well 18 I guess, of engine harness does. Look at this. Sorry, convoluted tubing. Fun fact about this engine and its wiring, it's got 2 ECMs, which is kind of cool. Just means more fun that we get to get stabbed with. I don't know if you could see it, but I have the engine also supported with jack stands on this table. The table is not strong enough to support this bad boy. This is from the days of Piège, where, let's be honest, Volkswagen was doing cool stuff. W8, R32, W12, V10 twin turbo. This is the engine that if you saw the video when it launched of a Touareg pulling like a 747 or something, which is absolutely insane, especially for the time. It's pretty impressive for its day. I don't think I've ever been this deep into one of these. We didn't see them very often. When I first started, they had one do like a runaway on a diesel, and I don't remember, I think I was off this day, but what I do remember is our regional guy having to come out and deal with it, and it was like $42,000 for a replacement engine. I think that car just went away. I don't think it ever got fixed. The thing I noticed the most about all this when I was taking it all apart is there's just so much, like so much stuff. So initially I was gonna get the whole harness out of the way, but it's buried on the sides. So we're just gonna flip this around to the front and it's gonna look kind of ugly, but maybe it'll at least be out of our way. So remember I said there's 2 ECMs, one plug for one ECM, one plug for the other ECM. This is a ground. The other cool thing is well, I don't know if it's cool, but it is. These 2 barrel connectors actually plug into the cylinder head. This one was actually leaking oil through into the harness, so not ideal. Let's see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. I'm gonna start removing the throttle bodies and the EGR valves and just get some like big stuff out of the way. By the way, look at all that soot. I bet it's never been cleaned. I'm gonna put this on the floor because, well, actually I'm gonna set it right here. There's so many pipes, freaking EGR pipes in this engine, it's crazy. Here's another, this is the actual EGR valve. You can see how much soot is inside of it. Look at that, yuck. Ooh, yeah, that feels real terrible. $1 says this is cross-threaded. Oh, they don't have their triple squares yet. Oh, there we go. That was harder than I wanted to work. Oh yeah, it's stripped. Oh yeah. That's why she didn't want to come out. Straight to the bin. Come on, man. Let's get this other side off of here next. This engine does look like it's had some stuff done to it. It was also 100% dead when I got it. Not only did I have to winch it in the shop, I had to also push it in the shop. Winch and push. There we go. A big chunk just fell out. That was funny. Here it is. A big old chunk. If I didn't have multiple tools for every job, these jobs would take me so much longer. And you'll see, especially as we get lower, the order becomes vital because you could easily not put a bracket on or layer a bracket or a wire connector, something wrong, and get the absolute pleasure of doing it a second time. Really though, like if you were gonna buy a set of tools to do exactly what I'm doing, the basics, right? 10, 13, 16, 18, you're working on a European car, so you need triple squares, you need Torx. By the way, I don't know which bank cam actually / allegedly is bad. The car unfortunately was so dead that I wasn't able to do any diagnostics on it. It was really the whole reason of getting it is I wanted to tear down this engine. Actually, that's the worst part, is like when these things are right, they're awesome. I considered fixing this thing up, making it, oh geez, fuel, and making it my daily. The problem is, probably would have cost me 10 grand to get this thing right. Leaking engine oil, leaking transmission fluid. It was so dead, but the batteries that it had in it were like a year old. I just can't imagine, like, if you aren't a DIYer, how you really can afford to own one of these things. They're just so expensive, which is ultimately what the guy sold it for, because he didn't want to spend the money on a camshaft. Camshaft, moderately common. Turbochargers, almost a guarantee you're gonna need them when we get there 9 years from now. Just cut it. Having to quiet my intrusive thought of just cutting it. That's not how we do engine teardowns unless it's a V10 Jag. By the way, if you haven't seen that video, it was a V12 Jag engine. A lot of people were really mad at me about that engine being so sad. Sorry. I did some research. They're worth nothing. Oh God. Oh, it's dripping everywhere. A while ago, Ray asked me what tools you needed to do this job, and I said, oh, nothing crazy. I'm lying. You need all the tools, every tool ever invented. This little guy just rounded straight away. I didn't even work real hard, probably because I went to the gym this morning. Old air-cooled Beetles are probably the most serviceable engine ever made. Compare that to this, the least serviceable engine ever made. All that for this little breather pipe here. Now we can pull this guy off and reveal, this is actually kind of a cool valve cover that was clean and now it's not. We have a bunch of 10 mil bolts that we gotta take out. All right, ooh, all right, how fun. Okay, valve cover out of the way reveals some pretty cool stuff. First of all, I'm gonna pull this cover off and you're gonna see this is a timing gear. The whole backside of this engine is where our timing is, and it's all gear driven. This is also our injectors. That's what these rockers are for right here. And then these lobes kind of here between, that's what opens our valves. Now, if we look really close, we can see some wear on our camshaft where it's starting to mushroom out at the high point of lift, which means our valves aren't opening all the way. And yeah, that's bad. So the good thing, we confirmed, we actually do have at least somewhat bad of a camshaft. Is it bad enough to cause the car to run horribly? I don't know yet. Again, I'm not sure which bank was the actual problem. I think I'm gonna do the other side as well so we can get an eyeball on that. Well, that's another way to do it. Then we'll pull the rockers off for the injectors, pull the injectors out, take a look at those, and keep on with our teardown. I hope this one's worse. So let's say you were actually gonna fix this and it definitely needed cams. You would 100% put both cams in, probably replace all the lifters, which I think ended up being like $3,500 something in just parts for that, not including all the bolts you're supposed to replace and a whole bunch of other stuff. Nice little score mark there. Let's see. Let me rotate this around here. I gotta tell you, oh yeah, so this one's pretty worn down. So we've confirmed we likely have some bad camshafts, which is really awesome. I want to get these camshafts out. I also want to show you what the backside gear set looks like, which means we still have more teardown to go. So I'm going to start working on this uppy-toppy stuff, try and get our EGR cooler off, our oil filter housing off, our intake manifolds off. We haven't even discovered our glow plugs yet. They're so far buried underneath the intake manifolds. I tell you, I can't stress how much this stuff is just shoehorned in all the places. Like everything is just layer upon layer upon layer of stuff. Man, you know, we love trashing on engineers, but man, sometimes you gotta sit back and give credit where credit is due. It may not be serviceable in any meaningful or real capacity, but it's damn cool. It's real cool until you gotta start doing some of this stuff on flat rate. Then the cool factor goes in the toilet. All right, let's get our cooler out of here. Look at this giant EGR cooler. I don't know, but I assume they make delete kits for the V10 because this is a whole heck of a jobby that could be eliminated. But the alternator is facing this way. So the pulley is on the back side of the engine and it's legit right underneath that EGR cooler that I just took off. Wild. I tried. Oh, come on. That's not good. It ain't got no ball no mo. Oh man. This alternator cable is all like the sheathing is all kinds of gone. In a lot of other engine teardown videos, there's been comments of like, hey, like you should have pressure washed that engine before you started taking it apart. And I think there's some real validity to that, especially when you know you're gonna reassemble everything. The main reason I don't is because I wanna see where problems exist. And the final one that was a little sketchy. If I break this ball end, I'm cooked. I didn't. Nice, thank you. Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. So this piece that I just took off, electronic thermostat. See the plug right here, similar to the W8. The W8 one sat like this. Here's our oil filter housing. The whole oil filter housing broke. You can see it right there. Not great, but not the end of the world. Let's see if we can get this coolant union, I guess you'd call it, out of here. Look at how crusty that is. That should give us the freedom now to access all of our intake manifold bolts. I'm gonna break all these loose by hand. There's also the fuel rail and the harness for our glow plugs. These were kind of dummy glow plugs, not so dummy like the ALH ones. I don't think you could just put 12 volts and power these things up, but it's not smart like the newer ones, like the CJAA engines and the 3 liters, where you could actually, with the scan tool, go in and look at compression because the glow plug had a pressure sensor in it. Grip edge for the win. It's kind of cool to sort of have your first time this deep in an engine, but then some of the little shortcuts and cheats that I might have for other ones, I'm not as queued up on it on this one. That makes it fun. Ah, there we go. Yeah, wiggle this guy out. One intake. Oh, I want to show you guys something. Watch this. So watch how much buildup these intake manifolds get. The ALHs, the old 1.9s in like Golf Beetle Jetta, would clog so much that you couldn't even put a pen through the hole here. We would take the manifold off, clean it, put it back on, and the owner would get like 50 horsepower because you actually could get air into the engine. With all that stuff out of the way, let's take a little bit deeper look. This is the union that lived right here. This went in here and the coolant temp sensor was right there. An important note, these little tabs actually flow coolant. So if you look at this one, it actually broke when I took it out. This is what it's supposed to look like. You can see the seal right there. So if you're doing this for some ungodly reason, I'm sorry, make sure that you're real careful and get some heat on this. Otherwise you're replacing this part and extracting that out of the cylinder head. Since we're right here, this is a glow plug harness. Guarantee this thing had some glow plug faults. This is actually really, look at the whole thing is just crumbling. All 10 of them are like that. What a nightmare to try and replace. I'm gonna get our wiring out of the way. We're gonna get the fuel rail out of the way. Then we're gonna move to the front of the engine, get everything off of there so we can twist it around. And then once we switch the engine around, I'll show you the high pressure fuel pumps and how those work. These glow plugs are real simple. It grounds through the head and then there's power. Once it's powered up, this little guy glows, warms up the cylinder to help ignite the fuel. Boom, your car starts faster when it's cold. Diesel only. Okay, let's struggle with getting some of this stuff off the front. So I'm gonna get these hoses off. This is just coolant. It's drippy. Everywhere is drippy. And we can get this whole drippy mess on out of here. Let's get our big damper out of the way, balancer, whatever you want to call it. Okay, this guy is basically a giant damper. Apparently inside this upper band is silicone oil. That exposes this front cover, which is held on with a bunch of triple squares. Let's take it off. Let's see what it looks like behind the cover. Also, you can really see just how much oil was leaking in this whole front of this engine, like whether it's spills from doing an oil change or filling the oil or just those gaskets leaking, this thing's been gushing. Oh, cool. A bunch of coolant. Tired of coolant. This plug here and this plug here are actually coolant draining holes. I don't know what the right word is. Maybe we can at least salvage some mess here. Not doing a very good job. Oh, we're dripping oil too. Oh, gross. There we go. There's your water pump. Oh, you can hear it dripping on the floor. Accept my fate. So messy, man. Oh, look at that. Let's get this cover off now that I'm thoroughly annoyed and messy. The cool thing about that is it exposes absolutely nothing. I wiggled the water pump a little bit. It didn't pop right out, so I'm gonna leave it. Time to struggle bus and get this thing turned around so we can check out really the coolest part of this whole engine. And just like that, we are on the flip. This feels so sketchy every time I do anything with it. Put our jack, look at this. I gotta use my whole body just to pump the handle. All right, let's go. So here's the backside of our engine. I took the torque converter off because I was a doofus when I was taking it out and didn't unbolt it. This is our ring gear. You can see the little teeth on it. That's what our starter engages, which our starter's right here, buried behind all this crap. We got our turbochargers here and here, alternator cable, our high pressure fuel pumps, which also have a small vacuum pump on them that gives vacuum to our brake booster. I mentioned the high pressure fuel pumps. These guys right here. I'm actually gonna take the cover off of this one. As you're looking at it, this is the bank that lives on the passenger side. This is the bank that lives on the driver's side. So bank 1, bank 2, bank 1's high pressure fuel pump has the vacuum port for our brake booster. And I think I'm gonna take this apart so we can see inside of it. Most certainly guarantee these pumps are not meant to be serviced at like a dealership or shop level, but that's okay, we're doing it anyway. So all that juice that just juiced out of there, that was all diesel fuel. So here we go, you can see the fuel pump. So as it rolls around, this little cam right here create our high pressure. Here's the little doors that stick down on it. That's kind of cool. It's like a rotary engine. Low pressure fuel comes in, this port goes in here and it's pumped out of this port where the banjo bolt is. Now we should be able to take the other part off and get to our vacuum pump side. This plate looks a little bit scored up, but not too bad. If you've seen a BPY apart, this may look familiar because they function basically the same way. The cam drives the vacuum pump, also drives the high pressure fuel pump. I'm gonna go ahead and guess this gasket right here has been leaking because it's all full of oil. So definitely would want to replace that. All right, let's get this turb ski off. Failure of the turbochargers is one of the more common issues with this engine. I think now might be a good time for my PSA. Anytime you do a turbocharger replacement, you're supposed to replace the oil feed lines. Why, Charles? Why do I have to replace the oil feed lines? So our oil, especially around a turbocharger, gets hot. What can happen over time is the oil can actually coke and harden, and those deposits can get trapped in the oil feed line and cause reduced oil pressure to your turbo, which when you have spinny things that are spinning real fast, they get hot, and we don't want turbski sadness. So we have a big engine, right? I think this is a 5-liter. Why in the world do we need a turbocharger? Mostly because it's cool, but also that's how we're getting our power. So when you turbocharge it, it smushes the air, shoves it in the cylinder so you can add more fuel. But why 2 little ones instead of 1 big turbski? This should provide better lower RPM drivability. If you had 1 big turbocharger, it might make 1,000 horsepower, but it's gonna suck driving it around town. If you have 2 small ones, you're probably gonna make half that power, but the power you have is in a lot more usable range. And it looks like we might have had some oil feeding through this bracket piece right here. I can't take the starter out till we get the engine mount out. But we'll do that soon. And you can't really see much inside of it unless we completely disassemble it, which is not off the table. This is going to go on the table. Man, I tried real hard to make that joke work for you guys and I failed, sorry. Just like we did for the passenger side bank, I'm gonna do the driver's side bank. We'll start with the high pressure fuel pump. Not gonna disassemble this one because they should basically be the same. Here's the piece where the cam slides in that drives the pump. So as the cam turns, it turns the pump. Something you need to pay attention to when you're dealing with fasteners, if you don't get the tool all the way in, you're almost guaranteed you're gonna strip the fastener out because that last one didn't go in far enough and I would have rounded it out without question. But look at how much oil and yuck is on this. Nothing catastrophic, right? Like it's not like you were having oil drip on the ground, but all this residue is from oil leaking. Now that we're starting to get all the clutter out of the way, we can actually see some of the awesome stuff on this engine. Our gear drive thing here is on the back. We'll see that very, very soon. But what's neat is the gear that drives the power steering pump, which is this piece right here. It also ends up driving the AC compressor. So it goes to the power steering pump. Then you got the little damper thing right here, kind of like we had on the alternator, behind the engine mount to our AC compressor, which is actually mounted near the front side of the engine. This is a common spot for this to be on a VW engine, but it's usually driven off the front side by a serpentine belt, not the back side, by a gear and a shaft. And I guess technically the power steering pump too. This is crazy. Next up, get this ring gear off of here. You know it's serious business when I break out the impact. And just like that, our ring gear comes off. Something I also want to point out, you'll notice there's this little piece right here. If you're ever doing one of these with a clutch or a ring gear like this or whatever, make sure you put this back on. And with that, we have the full breadth of this enormous engine back here. So there's like 9,000 screws and bolts and nuts that all have to come out. My goal is to get this piece right here off. So many bolts. I don't even know if the cardboard trick is gonna get it done here. In theory, that's all the bolts. We are gonna do some gentle persuasion. Okay, that was it. Oh, well, so this is just a cover, but look at what we have uncovered. Here is our gear girdle, I guess you would call it. This is our starter, and you can see kind of behind this cover, the gears that drive everything. So this gear up here drives the alternator. You can see there's different like reductions to get the right gear ratio. This is the one that drives the power steering pump, and then, you know, on the back side of that drives the AC compressor. And then our timing is also on here behind this girdle, so it's pretty wild. Initially, what I wanted to do was strip this whole backside off so you could really get in depth on these gears. However, really what we need to do now is pull the cylinder heads, which is cool because now we finally get to see how bad the cam damage is. Once these are off, I think we'll be able to piece it all back together and you'll see just this glorious mess. We're gonna do our injector bridge, then our injectors. If you're for some reason doing this, you need to know a couple of things before you go any further. There's some special tools required, shocking, I know, in order to take this stuff off and to put it back in, like a holder that goes to the front side of the engine and some other stuff that goes in the back side and then a thing that mounts right up here. I don't have any of that stuff, so we're not gonna worry about it. We're gonna do what our forefathers would have done and send it. Looks a little sad up here on the top. Unplug our injectors. Pretty cool, these are like inside. So here's our injector bridge. This goes to the front. Sometimes these injectors come right out and it's really easy. Sometimes they don't and it's a pain in the butt. Here's a little tip. If you have a HumbleMechanic TDI, which is what this one is, if your fuel in your tank or in your filter is black, you probably have bad injector seals. Carbon buildup, seals go bad. Otherwise, these are actually pretty solid. Very similar injector on the 1.9 HumbleMechanic. Enough horsing around. I think it's time to take this cam out. All right, probably gotta give these journals on the backside a little love tap. I keep losing my hammer. All right, we'll use this one. Just a little love tap. Oh, it was right here, in case anyone was wondering. So the journals for the camshaft actually look pretty good. I'm gonna clean them off in a second. We're gonna take a better look. Just a tiny bit of scoring right there on this cam cap. This one actually has a separate bearing too. So this engine actually has cam bearings. Most VW engines don't have a separate bearing. The bearing is the bore of the cap and the head. Okay, I need to take this bolt out right here. That sort of holds these brackets in place. It also looks like it bolts a gear in place. And I think after that, we should be able to get our camshaft out. Oh. Look at this. This is like the size of a Haldex filter. It's crazy. Okay, once that bolt's out of the way, we gotta get a little piece buried inside out of here. And I'm thinking that my injector slide hammer is gonna work for us. Oh yeah, it did. Look at that, popped right out. I don't even know what you'd call this. Just like a sleeve that kind of holds everything together here. Now, should be able to tap some of this apart and get our cam out. The gear out. So these go together like that. Let's see if I can get all these pieces out and we can look at how they actually go together on the bench. All right, let's look at this camshaft. We're gonna talk about two major things. One, I'm gonna show you the damage on the cam lobes itself. And then I wanna talk a little bit about a cool thing this engine can do to compensate for load based on temperature. So right here is where our camshaft is driven off of, right? There's another gear here that drives this gear, that drives this gear, and it has this bridge thing. This bridge can actually move a little bit to make sure that the load on these gears is always the same, no matter the temperature. There's not a lot of information on any of the training modules about it, but it's pretty cool that it can always compensate. The real deal is this sad camshaft. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lobes on our camshaft. One for exhaust, one for intake. I have a good lobe right here and a bad lobe right here. You can see right where it started to wear on the bad lobe. Not only is there metal missing, it's also like wider. If we were to put a dial indicator and roll it around and measure lift and duration, this one would probably be pretty close to factory right here, because this one looks great. This one would be cooked. This is the lifter that went to this cylinder. It's got some wear. This one is the one off of that lobe down here where it's all worn out. This metal is somewhere, or maybe was somewhere in this engine, but that's the kind of damage that happens when your cam wears out. If we were doing cams on this thing, we would do all of these, right? New cams, all new lifters and everything, but just cool to see such a good, accurate representation of the damage on the cam here versus here. Why this one versus that one? Drop that in the comments, because I would like to know, because I don't know. Since we're right here, I'm gonna get this cylinder head off. What's really cool about this engine is the head bolts go all the way through to where the upper main bearing assembly, I guess it would be called. So check out how long these bolts are. That is a serious bolt. What will we do with them? Lord only knows, but they're kind of cool. Okay, real quick, on the bottom side of this cylinder head, I just wanted to point out that sticking through right there, that's the glow plug. And then it's kind of hard to see, but right there, that's the tip of the fuel injector. And then we have 2 valves per cylinder. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side and see if the damage was worse or better. I gotta say, if nothing else, the parts of this engine are pretty damn stout. This one came apart much easier than the last side did. Let's revelio how bad our camshaft actually was. This camshaft is definitely still worn. You can feel the like crispy edges, but the other side was worse. None of the lifters have worn through. I'm gonna get the alternator and this oil filter housing cooler assembly out of the way, because pretty soon we're gonna have to rotate this bad beast upside down. Can I? Oh, I can just wobble this thing off. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay, actually, I may have been mistaken earlier. I kind of said it wasn't really belt driven. It was more gear driven, and that's actually accurate. It's more like a gear coupler. This is actually the same on the other end of this gear stack right here, and that's what drives the alternator. It has a sprag clutch in it too, which most Volkswagen alternators have, but this is cool. So much of this stuff is like complicated, convoluted. Why the hell would it be that way? And I agree with all that, but there's like some cool factor to it too. I think we can agree on that. Now, now we have exposed our valley. So I'm gonna get my extractor so that when we flip it, I don't wear it. So I wanna point something out. Look at how thick this head gasket is. So it's a 3-layer gasket, but dang ol', that's almost like a head spacer like I used on my Mark III. The reason that is, the piston actually protrudes above the deck of the block. I don't know what compression is on this engine, but our main dude Ray will put it up on the screen right now. Be like, compression on this engine is whatever. I think it's 18:1 actually. Okay, we gotta flip this thing over because we gotta get the lower and upper oil pan off. Oh, Jesus. That wasn't very glamorous, but it's kind of where I need it. All right. After that graceful performance of flipping over the engine, let's get this lower oil pan off. Even if you were just taking it apart to like never put it back together, this one's a tricky one. There we go, geez. Thought I missed a bolt. Look at this pan. Honestly, not horrible for 200-something thousand miles on it. What's cool, this is an oil drain, so it'll drain and then drain back down here to where the lowest point of the pan, roughly anyway. But there's some yuck in there. We have this module, here's the pickup. I'll be honest, I'm not super sure how all this comes apart. You know what happens in that case? We just start taking things apart till we get somewhere. That is a hell of an oil pickup. Jeez, look at this thing. This thing's enormous. If you ever do one of these, just know you're gonna need every tool in your toolbox, including some 14mm stuff that if you're a VW Audi tech, you don't ever use. Who uses 14s? Like Toyota maybe? Faye, if you're watching, let me know, is it Toyota? We exist in VW Audi world around here. The delusional paradise, where things you tell yourself aren't really that bad, but it's more of like a Stockholm syndrome kind of situation. Wow. So these are the tubes I was talking about. They look like they go this way. So probably feeding oil to our chain drive back here. Here's your drive gear, here's your driven gear. But like, holy crap, what a pump. Let's get this upper pan off. I wanna see where these tubes go. And now, look at that. This is the drive for the oil pump. It looks like it's got a balanced little counterweight on it. What's cool is the block and the crankshaft girdle are two separate pieces. Most VW engines, it's all one giant hunk of metal, aluminum or cast iron. This is two separate pieces. Let's get our oil pump drive out of the way. Then I think we can remove our gear set at the back. We'll pull a piston or two. This is the, oh, those are different lengths if you're rebuilding one. This must be like the only VW engine that actually has some level of serviceable bearings beyond the crankshaft. Going even further, this one, which is at the front of the engine, has a little thrust washer. Let's take this gear-driven thingy off. All right, well, I was gonna be nice to it, but I don't have it bolted to the table anymore, so we gotta break out the big boy. There we go, there's one. Ugh, slippery floor. Now we evaluate and see what else we got. Oh, I think that's everybody. Okay, this might be the coolest part of the whole video. Oh God, this is heavy. Ugh. Who in the crackhead German car engineer designed this? It's sad that you failed at Rolex, so you had to design this nonsense for us. This is timing. This drives the accessories on the V10 TDI Touareg. Wow. You know, what never did a good enough job of driving an alternator was a serpentine belt. When a gear is two gears meshed together, like together, I'm gonna count it as two gears. So there's 2 for each camshaft, 3, 4, 5, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 20 gears. Why? Why? This is cool. If this were aluminum and you could like make a clock out of it and have the gears turn, that'd be really neat, but it's actually really heavy. So the way it looks like this sits is I'm gonna pull off a whole rack. Oh God, it's so heavy. It weighs like 90 pounds. So yeah, you have an all aluminum block except you've added 3,000 pounds of cast iron. So how cool is this? Instead of being individual mains, it's all one girdle, which probably makes this thing pretty damn strong. Well, we got some wear on our bearings. It's not horrible. This one looks starting to get down to the copper here. Probably not causing any issue, but that would be something you'd want to address. Let's see if I can rotate this around. Still like an enormous rotating mass. Let's talk about something else that makes this engine super cool. These pieces right here are counterweights. These counterweights are actually bolted on. Normally it's machined and then you drilled out to lighten certain pieces of it as the rotating mass gets balanced. I think this is so neat. So it just bolts right on a square edge of the crankshaft. Boom shakalaka. Let's get a piston out. So here is our connecting rod cap. There we go. Now can I get it out? Oh, I can get it out, yes. Okay, what's cool about this? First of all, these are the kind that are cold cracked so that they fit perfectly together. You can see the jagged edge there. That's intentional. Now watch how weird these connecting rods actually are. I think I had said the pistons were weird. I meant the whole assembly. Our piston has the hole in the top. That's pretty common for TDIs. It actually looks like there may have been a coating on these two that started to scrub off. But the weird thing is, look at the offset of the connecting rod. So typically, the rod comes down and the bolts would be here. These are offset like this, which is cool. I just can't believe how thick these piston rings are. They're holding all's the boost. With all that, our piston is actually in pretty good shape. A little bit of scoring, a little bit of wear, but what do you expect at 200,000 miles? All right, I think it's pretty safe to say that's the most amount of stuff we've done on an engine teardown video by far ever in the history. To me anyway, this marks a super cool period in Volkswagen history. The Phaeton, the Touareg, the Mark IV R32, iconic. There's one right there, as a matter of fact. This is also the time in VW world where I started with Volkswagen, so always probably be a little extra special to me. This one is like 5 of 5 Charleses. I actually think I need to up my scale because just look around. So with that, I'm out. There's crap everywhere. And my least favorite part, everything is covered in oil everywhere.